His stick was slick inside her glove, not with sweat, with hydraulic fluid. Alarm, alarm, alarm. The cockpit was a symphony of failure. Red lit, screaming, dead. Valkyrie 2 is hit! I'm hit! Engine 1 is gone! Jester's voice was a panicked rasp, a ghost signal flickering through her damaged receiver. Where are you, Stiletto? God, where are you? Katerina Volkov screamed into the void, a sound absorbed by the dead carbon of her helmet. I'm on your 6, Jester! Brake right! Brake right! Her mic was dead. Her data link, a flat green line. Her IFF, a black hole. She was a phantom, a multi-billion-dollar ghost, watching her wingman die. The bandit leader, a sleek, shark-gray silhouette, slid into position, lining up the kill shot. Katerina armed her last R-77 missile. The targeting reticle was gone. The lock-on tone, silent. The Fenrir's advanced fire control was as dead as her comms. She had her eyes. She had the missile. And she had the enemy, who still thought she was just a sensor echo. Good. 72 hours earlier, Hangar 7, Bodo Air Base. Hangar 7 was cold. A precise, sterile cold that smelled of hydraulic fluid and ionized air. Major Katerina Volkov stood at the base of the ladder, her helmet tucked under her arm. The Fenrir loomed over her. It was not a machine. It was a 30-ton, $2 billion argument for her existence. Its lines were too sharp, its composite skin a flat, radar-dead black that seemed to drink the harsh, fluorescent light of the hangar. Her call sign was Stiletto. It was a name earned through a career built on surgical precision, on an intolerance for error. She trusted the Fenrir systems more than she trusted most people. Valkyrie flight, final check. The command voice crackled in the briefing room half an hour earlier. The holographic map table cast the room in sharp blue shadows. Mission is Silent Watch. Penetrate the A2AD bubble, map the new IADS grid, and RTB. MCON silence is absolute. If your stealth fails, you don't fight, you run. You do not exist. Her wingman, Jester, had shifted in his flight suit. Ma'am, intel shows heavy fighter patrols near grid 040. If they get a lucky paint. They won't, Katerina cut him off. Her voice was flat. The Fenrir doesn't get lucky paints. You just keep your distance, Jester. Keep me clean. He'd nodded, but his anxiety was a tangible thing, a grit in the smooth machinery of her plan. Jester relied on instinct, a sloppy, unpredictable variable. Katerina relied on the data. Now she ran a gloved hand along the fuselage. The skin was cold, smooth as obsidian. She began her walk around, a ritual of taps and visual checks that was more for tradition than necessity. The jet's internal diagnostics had already assured her it was flawless. She climbed the ladder. The cockpit thumped shut, sealing her inside. The world vanished, replaced by the soft green glow of the HUD and the steady, comforting hiss of the oxygen regulator. This was her church. The smell of recycled air, the perfect fit of the harness, the low electric hum of the avionics coming online. Valkyrie 1, clear for taxi. Copy. Valkyrie 1 is rolling. The Fenrir moved with a predator's grace. Jester, in his older conventional Su-57, fell in behind her. They took the runway, the Norwegian night dark and endless beyond the lights. Valkyrie 1, throttle up, engage! She pushed the throttle forward. The twin engines responded with a muffled, disciplined roar, a force that pressed her deep into the seat. The runway lights blurred into white streaks. She pulled back on the stick. The transition from ground to air was seamless, a release. They climbed, two ships against the dark, ascending into the frozen silence of the high north. Valkyrie 2 on your wing. Jester's voice came, a little too tight, Copy 2, maintain formation. We'll be in the red zone in 10. The red zone was the line on the map where the enemy's integrated air defense system began. It was a digital fortress, and they were about to fly through the front door. Command Valkyrie 1, we are approaching the line. Engaging mimicry. Copy 1. Good hunting. Command out. Katarina's fingers moved over the console. She input the final authorization. A new icon lit up on her panel, a stylized empty diamond. A low vibration ran through the airframe. The Fenrir's experimental stealth suite was active. On Jester's radar, her icon would still be there. But to the enemy, to the hundreds of ground radar stations now sweeping the sky, she was less than a ghost. She was a statistical impossibility. She was, in this moment, untouchable. The red zone was not a line. It was a feeling. A sudden palpable pressure as 1,000 invisible beams swept the sky. The air, once empty, was now thick with threats. Katarina's breathing remained steady, a practiced, metronomic calm. One in, one out. Her display was a clean, passive map. The Fenrir moved like a scalpel through the dark, its systems drinking in the electronic chatter, analyzing, sorting. Beside her, Jester's icon was a stable green chevron, holding its position 3 miles off her starboard wing, a silent, visible bodyguard. Valkyrie 1 began passive scan of grid 040, she whispered, a transmission that went no further than her own helmet. The mission was MCON. No transmissions, no radar, nothing. The jet was her armor, her invisibility cloak. The ROE was simple, PID required. They were weapons-free, but only on a target positively identified as hostile and imminent. This ground station was currently ambiguous. Their job was to listen, not to talk. Then it happened. A new sound. Not a lock-on, not a warning. A high-pitched, insistent chirp from her RWR, the radar warning receiver. A search radar. Old S-band, ground-based. It was sweeping, and it was close. A yellow spike appeared on her threat display. It was a dumb radar, a relic from a bygone era, too primitive for the Fenrir's advanced suite to even bother jamming. It should have been blind to her. It wasn't. The spike intensified. It wasn't just sweeping. It was lingering. Stiletto, you seeing this? Jester's voice, a tight burst of static on the encrypted link. That's a tall king radar. It's painting us. Recommend new vector, 080. Katarina's eyes narrowed. He was right. The ancient radar was getting a return. A faint, messy one. But it was there. This wasn't supposed to be possible. Her entire career, her entire identity as a pilot, was built on the perfection of this technology. Being detected on the first run by a piece of museum-quality junk, the humiliation of it felt like a physical heat on her neck. Hold vector, she said. Ma'am, that spike is solidifying. He's trying to get a lock. He's confused, Jester. He's seeing a ghost, a weather balloon. He is not seeing us. Katarina, that's not a risk we're cleared to take. Command said. She muted his channel for a half-second. Patience, Jester. His panic was a distraction. This was a test. Her jet, her mission. She would not be spooked by a relic. This was hubris. She would call it control. Valkyrie 1 to 2, I am testing the mimicry profile. Hold your course, I'm taking the threat. Stiletto, do not... She cut the throttle, a fractional decrease, and nosed the Fenrir down, directly at the source of the signal. The yellow spike on her display screamed. The radar operator on the ground, some half-asleep conscript, was probably spilling his coffee, staring at an impossible, flickering return. Katarina's hand moved to the stealth suite console. The system was running at 80%, She pushed the dial, feeling the click as it engaged 100%. She was diverting power from non-essential life support, the air in her mask turning a fraction staler, colder. The jet's skin would now be actively absorbing and refracting that specific S-band frequency. She flew straight into the lion's mouth. The yellow spike wavered. It flickered. Come on. The operator on the ground was sweeping again, frantically, trying to find the ghost. And then, nothing. The spike vanished. The high-pitched chirp was gone, replaced by the low, steady hum of the Fenrir's avionics. A small, cold smile touched her lips. She unmuted Jester. Threat is gone, Valkyrie 2, as I said. A ghost. Resume scan pattern. Silence on the comms for a long 3 seconds. Copy 1. Threat is gone. His voice was strained, a mix of relief and, she sensed, resentment. She had proven her point. The Fenrir was invincible. The human element had been the weak link. She re-engaged the throttle, the jet accelerating smoothly, leaving the blind, confused radar station miles behind. But the mimicry system was now running at 100% power, drawing a massive load from the reactor, and deep in the system's core, a single line of code, stressed beyond its tested parameters, began to cascade. The silence of the red zone returned, deeper this time. Katarina flew with a surgeon's steadiness. The Fenrir's passive sensors were a gaping maw, swallowing terabytes of electronic data. A web of hostile signals, search radars, targeting arrays, data links, was painting itself onto her holographic map. It was beautiful. A perfect, invisible infiltration. She glanced at Jester's icon. He was holding his position, disciplined, quiet. Good. The lesson was learned. Scan at 70%, she murmured to herself. The jet performed flawlessly. The mimicry suite, humming at full power, was a perfect shield. A new symbol flashed on her threat receiver. Then another. Contact. 2. Airborne. Bearing 090. They were high, fast-moving, hostile fighters, bandits. Her systems cross-referenced the emissions, Su-30s. Their radar was active, sweeping. Valkyrie 2. Bandits on the scope. Bearing 090. Looks like a standard patrol. They are not painting us, she said, her voice a flat monotone. Copy 1. Wait. I think they're vectoring. Katarina checked her display. Jester was right. The bandits, 80 miles out, had altered their course. Not a direct intercept. They were heading for a point just ahead of them, a predictable patrol route. Or they sensed something. They're still cold, Jester. Hold your course. We'll be past their track before they're a factor. Ma'am, the ROE is clear. Break contact. We are to disengage. We will, she said, her patience fraying. When they are a threat. 80 miles is not a threat. We are completing this scan. Right as the words left her mouth, her main display flickered. A half-second of digital snow. A burst of white static so fast she almost missed it. Her blood ran cold. What was that? She checked the power grid. All green. Mimicry suite, green. Engines, green. A power fluctuation. A simple glitch. The system was running at maximum. It was bound to have a hiccup. She dismissed it. But the flicker had planted a seed of doubt. A tiny, cold hairline fracture in her absolute faith. Scan at 90%, she said, pushing the thought away. 10 more minutes. Stiletto, they're accelerating. Jester's voice was sharp. They're coming for us. They've changed course. I'm breaking contact. South. Now. Before she could argue, his icon veered sharply south. Damn it, Jester. His panic was infectious. He was compromising the mission. Valkyrie 2, maintain. Flash. It was not a flicker. It was an explosion of pure, blinding white light. It filled the cockpit, erasing the HUD, the consoles, her own hands on the stick. It was followed by a sound she had only ever heard in simulations. The sound of catastrophic failure. A deep, guttural thud as the primary generator tripped, followed by an agonizing, absolute silence. The engines died. The avionics died. The steady hiss of her oxygen, gone. The Fenrir was no longer flying. It was falling. A 30-ton coffin of carbon fiber and dead electronics. Darkness. The only sound was her own breathing, a ragged, desperate gasp inside the helmet, the air already feeling thick and useless. Her heart hammered against the G-suit, a frantic, trapped bird. Aviate. She fought the dead stick, pure muscle memory, trying to stop the sickening, weightless tumble. Navigate. Her compass was a black screen. Communicate. Her radio was a dead switch. This was not a failure. This was an erasure. She was blind. She was mute. She was falling. Then, as suddenly as it died, the jet gave a violent shudder. Clang, clang, clang. The emergency power unit, the APU, had kicked in. A weak, flickering red light illuminated the cockpit. The secondary systems rebooted. The HUD flashed, not green, but a sickly, emergency red. The engines, starved, coughed, and reignited with a hollow roar. She was flying again. But everything was wrong. Her navigation system was gone. Her comms, dead. Her data link, a flat green line. Her IFF, a black hole. And her radar was screaming. She wasn't invisible. She was a lighthouse. Every hostile radar in the sector was locked onto her. No. Wait. She looked closer, her mind struggling to process the flood of wrong data. The friendly data link was dead. The friendly IFF was gone. But the hostile threat board, it was also empty. She looked at her own radar display. It was supposed to show Jester, the bandits, the coastline. It was empty. Not black. Just empty. As if the world beyond her canopy had ceased to exist. The mimicry system hadn't just failed. It had inverted. It had bricked her entire sensor suite. She couldn't see anyone. And she realized with a dawning, sickening horror, no friendly asset could see her. The cockpit was a tomb, lit in the dim, sickly red of emergency power. Katerina was flying, but she was blind. The HUD was a smear of useless red lines. Her radar, her data link, her threat display, all were flat, empty black screens. The world beyond her cracked canopy had simply ceased to exist. Aviate. She was still doing that. The jet was responding, a sluggish, wounded animal, but it was flying. Navigate, impossible. Her GPS was gone. Her inertial navigation was dead. She was a speck of metal over a dark ocean, with no idea which way was home. Communicate. Her gloved fingers flew across the console, a frantic, desperate dance. Radio 1. She toggled the switch. Click, click, dead. Radio 2. Click, dead. Data link. She tried to reboot the system. The screen stayed black. IFF. She slammed the ident button, the universal signal for I am friendly. The button didn't even light up. A cold, acidic panic began to rise in her throat, burning past the disciplined calm. She was not a pilot. She was a multi-billion-dollar asset, lost, dark, and silent. She was a liability, a hole in the sky. She was alone. The two bandits were still out, there. Jester was out there. They were in a fight, or searching, or running, and she was just here. A silent, useless passenger in her own failing jet. She cycled through the frequencies, a desperate rhythmic prayer. Nothing but static. Wait. One last chance. The emergency guard frequency. 243 no megahertz. unencrypted, hardwired, designed to work even if the rest of the jet was on fire. She switched the dial. Static, a hiss of empty air, and then a voice. "Is 2, on my 6. Stiletto, talk to me." Jester. His voice was thin, ripped apart by static and panic, but it was him. A lifeline. Relief washed over her, so strong it made her dizzy. "Jester, this is Valkyrie 1. I'm here, I'm blind. All systems down. My transmitter is—" She stopped. His voice continued, screaming over her. "Valkyrie 1, where are you? I've lost your data link. I've lost your IFF. Stiletto, Katarina, answer me. God, answer me." He couldn't hear her. Her transmitter was dead. She was a receiver only, a silent witness. "Jester!" she screamed, the sound deadened by her own helmet. "I'm here! I'm right here!" She slammed a fist against the unresponsive console. The impact sent a jolt of pain up her arm, but the vibration felt good. It was real. I am real. "Jester, I'm... She watched her hands, pale and shaking in the red light. The isolation was no longer a concept. It was a physical thing, a crushing weight in the airless cockpit. He was right there, somewhere in the dark, close enough for his weak emergency signal to reach her, and she was screaming into a dead mic. His transmission changed. The panic was gone, replaced by a terrible, hollow calm. He was talking to someone else. Base. "Mayday, mayday, mayday. This is Valkyrie 2. I am Winchester, out of missiles, and bingo, low on fuel, requesting immediate vector to tanker. And Valkyrie 1 is..." A pause, a ragged breath. "Valkyrie 1 is gone. I saw a flash, an energy spike. Then she's gone, vaporized." He was choking on the words. "Valkyrie 1 is KIA. Katarina stopped breathing. The air in her mask felt thick as water. Vaporized. KIO. He was reporting her death. She was alive, blind, and falling. And to the rest of the world, to the only friendly pilot in the sky, she had just been erased. She was no longer a pilot. She was a phantom. KIA. The word echoed in the dead cockpit. It hung in the air, a final, cold judgment. Katarina's training, the thousands of hours of simulated emergencies, screamed at her. Aviate, navigate, communicate. She was aviating. The jet was stable, a ghost ship on a dark sea. Navigation was a guess. She was holding what she thought was a westward heading, a desperate attempt to drift toward friendly airspace. Communication was a one-way torture. "Valkyrie 2, I am evading. Bandits are on my 6. Defensive! Defensive!" Jester's voice, no longer mourning, was a raw, breathless scream. They had found him. Katarina's stomach clenched, her entire body tensed, her hand crushing the useless stick, her feet jamming against rudder pedals that were connected to nothing. She was a passenger, a passive, silent witness to a murder. "Flares! Flares! Flares! He's got a lock! Braking left!" Through the static, she could hear the grunt of high G exertion, the whoosh of his breathing as the G-suit squeezed his body. She was right there. A mile, 10 miles, 50. She had no idea. She was close enough to hear him die, but not to stop it. My failure. My silence. The hubris of Chapter 2, her arrogant dismissal of the dumb radar, felt like a physical sickness. She had pushed the Fenrir's system, pushed her authority, and broken the most valuable weapon in their arsenal. Now Jester was paying for it. "Splash one! I got him! I splashed one!" A surge of adrenaline, of fierce, impossible pride. He'd done it. Alone, believing his leader was dead, he'd taken one of them down. "One remaining! He's on me! He's on me! I can't shake him!" The sky outside her canopy was a void. She strained her eyes, searching the blackness for the magnesium-bright pop of a flare, the streak of a missile trail. Anything. Nothing. The battle was a purely auditory event, a horror movie playing out in her helmet. She was invincible, and she was useless. The Fenrir was the most advanced fighter jet ever built, and it was now a 20-ton paperweight. She had all the power in the world, and none of it. Her duty was to protect her wingman, her oath, mutual defense. It was the first, inviolable rule, and she was flying in circles, listening. She tried the radio again. She mashed the transmit button. Click, click, click. "Jester!" she yelled, knowing it was futile. "I'm here! Break right! He's—" She didn't know. She had no data. She was just a voice in a box. "Engine 1 is hit! I'm on fire! Mayday! Mayday! I'm on fire!" The panic was back, colder this time, laced with the flat finality of defeat. The transmission cut out. Not a burst of static, just silence. The carrier signal was gone. "Jester," she whispered. The empty hiss of the guard frequency was her only reply. "Jester, talk to me." Nothing. He was gone. The fire, the sea, the remaining bandit. She was alone, truly, finally alone. The silence in her helmet was vast, heavier than any ocean. It was the sound of her own failure, of her unexercised power. She flew on, her hands cemented to the controls, her eyes staring, unseeing, into the dark. There was nothing left to do. No one left to save. Then, a new sound. A faint beep. It was so quiet, so out of place, she thought she was imagining it. Beep, beep, beep. It was coming from her RWR, the radar warning receiver. The system that was supposed to be dead. It wasn't a lock. It wasn't a search radar. It was faint, rhythmic, and old. She stared at the black screen, at the one tiny, flickering green light in the corner. It was the remaining bandit. He was hunting. And his ancient, analog radar, it was pinging off her. Her grief was a physical weight, a cold, dense mass in her chest. He's gone. She was a failure, a silent, flying tomb. Her hands, rigid on the controls, were useless. She was reduced to banging on the dash, a primitive, desperate act. Useless, useless, and still, the beep. Faint, rhythmic. Beep, beep, beep. She forced her eyes to focus. The RWR. The screen was black, but in the bottom left corner, a single green pixel pulsed. It was an S-band signal. The tall King radar, the one she had arrogantly dismissed. It was still sweeping. And it was seeing something. It was seeing her. The sound was not a lock-on. It was a paint. A faint, momentary return. The bandit was out there, his radar sweeping, and his obsolete equipment was picking up a ghost that Her Own Squadron's multi-billion-dollar data links could not. A new noise crackled in her helmet, tearing through the static. "Mayday! Engine 1 is out. Severe en fuel. Jester." He was alive. The voice was a strangled gasp, broken by static and the high-pitched shriek of a damaged engine. He hadn't been vaporized. His transmitter had failed in the high G turn. He was alive. He was bleeding fuel, and the remaining bandit was on him. The cold mass of grief in her chest ignited. It became a white-hot, singular focus. Help him. But how? Her comms were dead. Her radar was black. Her weapons. She glanced at the panel. Dark. All of it. Think, Katerina. Think. The RWR was working. Why? It was an older system, hardwired, less integrated than the advanced mimicry suite. It was analog. Her eyes darted around the cockpit. What else was analog? The backup attitude indicator. A simple gyro ball. It was tumbling, useless. The magnetic compass, spinning wildly, confused by the damaged electronics, the radio altimeter. She looked down. The small digital readout was black, but beside it was the old analog needle, the backup system. The needle was steady. It read 15,000 feet. It was working. A spark. Not a glitch. A pattern. The Fenrir's catastrophic failure was not total. It was specific. The inversion had created a digital black hole, filtering and destroying all modern, encrypted, friendly signals. It had erased her from her own side. But the old, simple analog systems, they were still there. And the enemy? Their technology was a mix of old and new. The bandit's primary radar was likely as blind as Jester's, but his backup, his old S-band. The beep on her RWR changed. It became a solid, unwavering chirp. The bandit wasn't just sweeping. He had found her. His analog radar was pinging off her, and the signal, while confusing, was strong enough for him to investigate. He had left Jester. He was coming for the ghost. She looked at the RWR, the solid chirp. She looked at the dead comms panel. She looked back at the chirp. She wasn't a ghost to everyone. To her friends, she was invisible. To her enemy, she was an anomaly, and an anomaly could be a target. It could be a lure. A cold, terrible idea began to form. A weakness could be a weapon if you were desperate enough to use it. Jester was still alive. That one fact recalibrated Katarina's universe. The fog of despair evaporated, replaced by a cold, crystalline purpose. Jester was alive, crippled, and being hunted. She was invisible, silent, and flying the most advanced weapons platform on Earth. A platform that was, at this moment, a colossal failure. Or perhaps a colossal opportunity. The chirp of the enemy S-band radar was steady now. Beep, beep, beep. He was close. He was confused. A pilot hunting a damaged Su-57 doesn't stop to investigate a weather echo unless that echo is deeply, fundamentally wrong. She was the wrongness in his sky. Survival instinct. Training. Every fiber of her being screamed, "Run." A pilot who is painted runs. A stealth pilot who is painted disappears. Her orders were explicit. If your stealth fails, you run. She gripped the throttle. Jester's breathing was a ragged, wet sound in her ear, punctuated by the shriek of his failing engine. Losing altitude. 9,000. He was going down. The bandit would be on him in seconds, finishing the kill. She pushed the throttle forward. This was not running. This was not survival. This was a choice. It was a conscious, unobserved, and utterly insane decision to fly toward the enemy, using herself as bait. "Come on," she whispered, her voice a dry rasp in the mask. "Leave him. Look at me. Look at the ghost." She needed to make her phantom echo stronger, more enticing. She needed to be more interesting than a dying wingman. Her eyes scanned the dead consoles, the EW suite. The mimicry system had inverted her data links, but what about the jammers themselves? They were just powerful microwave emitters. They were dark, dead. She tried the master power. Nothing. She tried the manual override. The switch was stiff, the system unresponsive, useless. She hit the panel, a flash of pure, cold rage. The red emergency light flickered. Wait. The jammers were tied to the primary generator, but the APU, the emergency power, was running. There had to be a way to hotwire the emitters, to bypass the fried digital brain and just shout. She found the panel for the environmental controls, popped the fuse cover, and slammed her fist into the breakers. A shower of sparks. The smell of ozone, sharp and acrid. A high-pitched whine began to build, a sound that drilled directly into her skull. The EW panel flickered. A single amber light. Manual. Active. She had done it. She had bypassed the smart system and forced the Fenrir's powerful jammers into a dumb broadcast mode. She was no longer a subtle, shifting echo. She was a raw, analog scream. The beep on her RWR changed instantly. It became a solid, screech. She had his full attention. What is that? Command, I have a massive EW spike. Grid 040. Jester's voice. He could hear her noise. Valkyrie 2! She screamed into her dead mic. Get out! Go south! Go! Her passive sensors, the one system besides the RWR that seemed to have a flicker of life, showed the bandit's icon. It had been a red triangle descending on Jester's last known position. Now, it stopped. It wavered. It turned. The bandit pilot, confronted with a damaged, easy kill and a screaming, inexplicable electronic anomaly, chose the anomaly. The red triangle changed vector, accelerating directly toward her. A cold, terrible success. It worked. Jester was limping away, his transmissions already fading as he headed south, and she was now alone, in a blind jet, with a fully armed enemy fighter closing for the kill, drawn in by a trap he couldn't resist. The hunter had become the lure. The high-pitched screech of the enemy radar lock was a physical thing, a needle in her brain. There was no ambiguity now, no ghost. He saw her. He was coming, and he was angry. Aviate. The word was a mantra, a single point of light in the overwhelming red gloom of the cockpit. She was blind, her jammers screaming into the void, and he was a shark drawn to the thrashing. A new alarm blared, this one pulsing with a terrifying, immediate urgency. Missile, missile, missile. Her RWR, the one simple analog system that still loved her, was screaming. He had fired, an IR missile probably. A heat seeker. He didn't need a radar lock. He just needed to point his nose at her massive, screaming electronic signature and let the missile find her engines. She had nothing. No flares. No chaff. The dispensers were dark. Her advanced mimicry suite was a useless heap of fried circuits. She had the stick, she had the engines, and she had her eyes. Where? She craned her neck, her G-suit inflating instantly, crushing her legs and torso as she hauled back on the stick and jammed the rudder. The Fenrir responded, a wounded behemoth, protesting the maneuver with a gut-wrenching shudder. The G-force slammed her into the seat. Her vision tunneled, the red cockpit lights blurring into a gray haze. Breathe, Katerina. Breathe. There. A pinprick of white fire, arcing up, impossibly fast. It was leading her. He was a good pilot. She reversed the turn, a brutal, bone-jarring negative G maneuver that threw her up against the harness, her stomach lurching. The jet screamed. She could feel the airframe trying to tear itself apart, the rivets straining against the metal skin. Come on, you pig. Fly. The missile followed. It was too smart. She had one chance. She chopped the throttles, slammed the air brakes, a desperate, suicidal move in a dogfight. The Fenrir decelerated with the grace of a falling building. The missile, expecting a high-speed target, overshot. It streaked past her canopy, a white-hot magnesium flare, so close she could have read the serial number. It exploded harmlessly, kilometers ahead. She survived. Her breath came in, ragged, burning gasps. She was shaking, her entire body slick with a cold sweat that had nothing to do with the failing environmental controls. She had survived. Her eyes, blurry from the G's, tried to refocus on the panel. She was alive, and she saw it. Amidst the dead black panels of her weapons console, a single, steady light. It was green. It sat above the trigger on her stick. The master arm switch. The system was dead. The fire control was gone. But the trigger, the physical, mechanical, analog trigger, it was live. She looked at the weapons display. Black. But the hardwired backup panel, a simple row of indicators near her knee. One light, R-77, Station 3, armed. The system crashed, the sparks, the override. It hadn't just activated the jammers. It had hotwired her last missile. She had no radar, no lock, no HUD, no targeting reticle. But she had one live, unguided R-77 missile. It was a mad dog shot, a 1 in a million point-and-shoot prayer. It was a court-martial offense in peacetime and an act of pure desperation in war. The bandit was already turning, coming back for a second pass, this time with guns. She didn't just survive. She now had one impossible bullet in the chamber. Her human skill had beaten his missile. Now, her desperation would have to beat his jet. The bandit was gone. She hadn't fired. She couldn't. He was a ghost, a flicker on her damaged RWR, and by the time she had oriented her jet, he had dived, spooked by the unguided missile he knew she must have, or perhaps simply realizing his prey was far more dangerous than she appeared. He had run. Katerina let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. The air in her mask was hot and tasted of ozone and fear. She was alone again, but Jester was still out there. Valkyrie 2, still airborne. Barely. Angel, I need an angel. His voice was a weak, intermittent plea on the guard frequency. He was calling for the tanker, the angel. She was no angel. She was a silent shepherd, a useless ghost. She pointed her nose south, the direction she prayed Jester was heading. The Fenrir was damaged, the controls heavy and unresponsive, but it was flying. She had no navigation, only the faint signal of Jester's radio and a desperate hope. Her cockpit was agonizingly quiet. The adrenaline of the dogfight faded, replaced by a cold, hollow dread. She was forced to just watch, to listen. The most advanced piece of military hardware in the world, and her only function was to be an ear. She was escorting him, a phantom on a wing he couldn't see, offering comfort he couldn't hear. Command? Valkyrie 2? I'm at 5,000. Fuel critical. I'm not going to make the tanker. Each word was a blow. Hold on, Jester, she whispered into the dead mic. You're close. Just hold on. She willed the words to him, a useless, desperate telepathy. Her RWR, the only system still offering any intel, flickered. Not from the north, where the bandit had fled. From the south. Beep. Beep. 2 new contacts. Airborne, climbing fast. They were rising from the enemy coastline. They had heard the Mayday. They had seen the fight on their ground radar. They were coming to finish the job. They were coming between Jester and his rescue. Jester! She screamed, slamming her fist on the console. Bandits! South! Break west! Break west! He couldn't hear her. His transmissions were just a loop of ragged breathing and engine alarms. 4,000, losing hydraulics. He was slow. He was trailing fuel, and 2 fresh hunters were climbing right into his path. Her presence meant nothing. Her one missile, her mad dog shot, was useless without a target she could see, and she could see nothing. This was the true low point. Not the crash, not the fight. It was this, the agonizing, absolute impotence. The isolation was complete. She was a witness to a tragedy she was powerless to stop. The high-pitched shriek of Jester's engine changed. It sputtered. It coughed. A final, terrible silence on the line. Then, his voice, shockingly clear. Mayday, Mayday, Mayday! Valkyrie 2 is ejecting! 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 A thump. Then, nothing but the open mic hiss of wind. He was down. He was down, in the freezing water, and the bandits were closing. Combat search and rescue operation would be launched, bringing more friendlies into this slaughter. She was right there, and she couldn't even tell him to hold on. The open mic hiss of Jester's radio cut off. The silence was absolute. He was down. Katerina flew in a cold, blind rage, her jet a useless coffin. The two red icons on her passive sensor, the only thing besides the RWR that seemed to work, were the new bandits. They were no longer climbing. They had leveled off, accelerating, heading directly for Jester's last known position. They weren't just investigating. They were hunting a pilot in the water. Then, a new sound. Peep. 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 It was faint, regular, and unencrypted. Jester's emergency beacon. The Kospas Sarsat signal. The sound of survival. It was also a dinner bell for the bandits. Her RWR, the simple analog system, registered the beacon. A tiny, friendly pulse on the same screen as the two hostile radar sweeps. She had one missile. The green, armed light was a mockery. A bullet with no gun. A weapon with no eyes. She couldn't lock the bandits. She couldn't see them. She was a ghost, a witness, a failure. Peep. 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 The bandits were getting closer. Peep. 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 The RWR saw the beacon. Green light. Armed. An idea formed. A terrible, monstrous, impossible idea. Her weapon system was dead, but the missile itself was live. The APU was powering the master arm switch. The system was broken, but it was still connected. Her RWR could see the beacon. Could she tell the missile to fly at the beacon? It was insane. It was a court-martial offense, a friendly fire incident of the highest order. Missiles were designed specifically to ignore friendly frequencies. You couldn't mad dog a missile at your own rescue signal. But her system wasn't just broken, it was shattered. The safety protocols were gone. The digital handcuffs were unlocked. She was not a pilot anymore. She was a hacker, fighting a ghost in her own machine. Her fingers flew over the dead weapons console. The screen was black, but the physical buttons, the backup manual overrides, were still there. She found the Seeker Head sub-menu. It was supposed to be locked, accessible only to ground maintenance. She hit the button. The screen flickered. A single line of text appeared in grainy red emergency font. Manual frequency input. The crash. The power surge. It had thrown the system into a raw diagnostic mode. Her heart was a drum. The bandits were descending. Her RWR showed them beginning their search pattern, right over Jester. She had to do this. She had to fire at her friend to save him. Her fingers, trembling, typed in the numbers. 2, 4, 3, 0. The emergency guard frequency. The beacon. She hit Enter. A loud clack resonated through the airframe. On the weapons panel, a new light flashed amber. Seeker SLVD, slaved. The missile's Seeker head, its own brilliant, independent brain, was no longer looking for a radar lock. It was now a dumb, obedient bloodhound, programmed to fly directly into the heart of one signal. Jester's beacon. It wouldn't hit Jester. The missile was a proximity fuse. It was designed to detonate near a large metal object, like a fighter jet. Not a man in a raft. But it would fly at him. It would fly directly at the bandits now circling above him. "Forgive me, Jester," she thought, her hand moving to the trigger. The trap was set. The bait was her own wingman, and the gun was pointed straight at his heart. The amber light for Seeker SLVD pulsed with a sickly, judgmental rhythm. The high-pitched screech of the two bandits' search radars filled her helmet, a frantic, overlapping noise. They were low. They were hunting. Peep. 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 Jester's beacon was a steady heartbeat beneath their electronic screaming. It was the only friendly signal in her world, and she had just aimed a 200-pound warhead at it. Katerina's thumb rested on the trigger. The plastic felt slick inside her glove. This was a monstrous act, a perversion of every rule, every instinct, every oath she had ever taken. A pilot's job was to save the man on the ground, not to fire on him. Peep, peep, peep. The bandits were descending, their icons on her passive display merging, becoming one cluster of hostile intent, right on top of Jester's signal. They would see his raft. They would strafe it. She was out of time. The moral horror was a physical thing, a cold, acidic bile rising in her throat. She was choosing. She was choosing to risk killing Jester herself, on the 1,000,000-to-1 chance she could save him from a certainty. It was a grotesque calculation, a sacrifice made in total, absolute silence, witnessed by no one, justifiable to no one. Her career was over. Her life as she knew it was over. This one act, this press of a button, was a line she could never uncross. Forgive me, Jester. Her thumb depressed the trigger. The click was small, almost anticlimactic. For a half-second, nothing. Then, the Fenrir bucked, a violent, definitive thump that resonated through her very bones. The jet lurched, a dead-weight recoil. A flash of brilliant white light illuminated the cockpit as the R-77 missile ignited, tearing itself from the internal bay. It streaked away, a spear of solid fire against the black sky. "Mad dog! Mad dog! Mad dog!" she screamed, the word a raw, primal tear in her throat, hurled into the dead silence of her own mic. It was a prayer. It was a curse. It was a final, desperate claim of responsibility. The missile was a betrayal. It was a hope. It did not care. It flew true. She watched, frozen, her breath trapped in her chest. The missile was a bright, receding star, a line of judgment. It did not waver. It was perfectly, horribly slaved to Jester's beacon. It flew straight and level, then, as it acquired the signal, it dipped. It was heading for the water. It was heading for him, though. Bandits were still there. 2 radar signals, frantic. The missile closed the distance in seconds. Her world compressed to that single point of light. Fly true. Fly true. She watched it merge with the 2 bandit icons. She watched it merge with Jester's beacon. A single shared point of data on a black screen. Please. A flash. Not a small explosion. A catastrophic, blinding white detonation that lit the undersides of the clouds, miles away. A silent, expanding flower of pure, destructive energy. The proximity fuse. It had seen them. It had seen the huge metal airframes of the 2 Su-30s descending, perfectly positioned. The blast was immediate and overwhelming. The RWR screen, her one window to the world, went blank. The screech of the enemy radars, gone. The peep of Jester's beacon, gone. The screen was just empty. A vast, roaring silence filled her helmet. "No," she whispered. The word was a fog of condensation on her visor. "No, no, no." She had done it. She had saved him from the enemy just to kill him herself. The warhead, the proximity, too close. She had failed. It was the monstrous, final failure. Her hands went limp on the stick. The jet, untended, began a slow, sickening drift. And then, faint, weak, buried in the static of the blast's aftermath. Peep. She stopped breathing. Peep. It was slow, The signal was damaged, weak, but it was there. Peep. He was alive. The beacon was still beeping. The bandit icons were gone. They had vanished. She had done it. A sound tore itself from her throat, a choked, broken sob that was half laugh, half scream. She was a monster, and she was a savior, and no one would ever know. The weak, triumphant peep of Jester's beacon was already fading. He was alive, but he was miles behind her, a problem for another, better-equipped rescue team. Katerina was still a ghost, and she was bleeding. The adrenaline that had held her together, the spike from the missile evasion, the cold focus of the beacon shot, drained away, leaving an abyss. Her limbs felt like lead. Her head throbbed, a dull, heavy ache inside the helmet. She was exhausted, a bone-deep weariness that went beyond the physical. She was also, she realized, out of fuel. The brutal, full-throttle maneuvers, the high-G turns, the suicidal air brake. She had demanded everything from the Fenrir. The launch of the R-77, a massive power draw, had been its final gift. Now the jet was dying. The engines, already damaged, coughed. A violent, shuddering vibration that ran up the stick and into her arms. The red emergency lights in the cockpit flickered. The APU, the emergency power, was faltering. Bingo, 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 a new alarm. This one a low, mournful tone. The fuel warning. It wasn't just low, it was gone. She was flying a 30-ton brick of ice and dead electronics. She was still over the ocean. The magnetic compass, the only navigation tool she had, was spinning sluggishly. West. She thought she was heading west, toward friendly territory, toward the Norwegian coast. But she had been flying blind for what felt like an eternity. The engine on the right coughed again, a final metallic gasp. It went silent. The Fenrir yawed violently, trying to flip onto its back. She jammed the left rudder, fighting the asymmetric thrust with pure, burning muscle. Her leg trembled with the strain. Not here. Not in the water. Losing the Fenrir in enemy territory was not an option. Losing it in the deep, unrecoverable black of the ocean was worse. The jet, its data recorder, it was the only proof. It was the only witness to what had happened, to the system failure, to the sacrifice. Without that black box, she was just a story. A crazy pilot who got her wingman shot and then vanished. She had to bring it home. Protocol was clear. Controlled ejection. The ROE for a compromised experimental craft was to point it at the ocean, set the auto-destruct, and punch out. Save the pilot. Destroy the tech. She put her hand on the yellow and black striped handle of the ejection seat. She could pull it. She could be free. She could be floating under a silk canopy in seconds. She looked at the dead, black screens. Pilot error. That's what they would call it. Pilot error secondary to catastrophic systems failure, her word against a $2 billion program. No, she wasn't giving them the easy out. The second engine died. The sudden, absolute silence was terrifying. The only sound was the high-pitched shriek of wind rushing past the canopy, a sound that meant she was falling, and falling fast. She fought the stick, her arms burning. Through a break in the clouds below, she saw it. Not water. White. A long, jagged stretch of white, gleaming in the faint moonlight. Ice, a frozen coastline, land. She wasn't going to make the base. She wasn't going to make a carrier. But she could make the ground. She pitched the nose down, trading her last altitude for airspeed. She had one chance. One glide. The tundra rushed up to meet her. It was not a runway. It was a jagged, uneven expanse of rock and ice. She lowered the landing gear. The manual release took all her strength. A green light. Down and locked. This is going to hurt. She wasn't flying a jet anymore. She was aiming a missile at the planet. For the record, she whispered, her voice a dry crackle in the dead air. I was here. The ice filled the canopy. She hauled back on the stick, flaring, bleeding off the last knots of speed. The impact was not a crash. It was a geological event. The first sensation was antiseptic, a sharp chemical smell that burned her nostrils. The second was pain, a dull electric throb in her left leg and a fire in her ribs. The third was sound, a rhythmic, metronomic beep, a heart monitor. Katerina's eyes fluttered open. The light was too bright, a flat, sterile white that was the opposite of the cockpit's red gloom. A hospital. She was alive. Her throat was raw. She tried to swallow, a dry, rasping cough racking her body. A jolt of white-hot agony shot through her chest. "Easy, Major." A voice, not Jester. Deep, authoritative. She turned her head. The movement felt slow, syrupy. The room was small, gray, and official. A man in a crisp uniform sat by her bed. Colonel's eagles on his collar. He was not a doctor. Behind him, standing against the wall, were two other figures, men in dark, nondescript suits. They had no rank, no insignia. They were the men who listened, the men who cleaned up, the spooks. "Colonel," her voice was a croak. "Colonel Radek, Air Force Intelligence," he said. He did not smile. "You've been unconscious for 36 hours, Major Volkov. You have 2 fractured ribs, a broken tibia, and severe hypothermia. The rescue team that found you, they were lucky. Your beacon only activated on impact." Her mind was a fog, a thick, cottony barrier of painkillers and trauma. 36 hours. "Jester," she whispered. "Valkyrie 2, is he?" "Warrant Officer Jester is alive," Radek said, his eyes hard, unreadable. "He was picked up from the water, severe frostbite, but alive. His report is problematic." The mission," she tried to sit up. The pain lanced her, forced her back down. "The mission," Radek said, leaning forward slightly, "is why we are here." The 2 men in suits watched her. They did not blink. "The system," she began, the words thick, hard to form. "The mimicry suite. It failed. It inverted. A total systems crash. I was blind. I was—" "You were what, Major?" "Mute. Dark. My data link. My IFF. Gone. Jester. He couldn't see me. He reported me KIA." Radek's expression did not change. "We've heard his report. He claims you were vaporized. He saw an energy spike. It was the system failing. It was the inversion. I was there. I heard him. The bandits." She recounted it all. The desperate, one-way conversation. The dogfight she could only hear. The realization of the flaw, the analog ghost, the lure, the missile evasion. The room was silent, save for the steady beep of her monitor. The men watched her, their faces blank stone. Did they think she was insane? Had the G-forces, the crash, broken her mind? "And the bandits, Major? The 2 that came for Warrant Officer Jester?" Radek asked, his voice dangerously quiet. I... How did she say this? "I had 1 missile, an R-77. The crash hot-wired it. The fire control was dead. I slaved it. To his beacon. To 243 no." One of the spooks raised an eyebrow. Just a fraction. "I slaved a live missile to a friendly beacon," she said, the words tasting like ash. "And I fired it. Mad dog. It destroyed them. It worked." The silence that followed stretched, became brittle. Radek sat back, lacing his fingers. The words hit her harder than the crash. Corrupted. Wiped. We found the wreckage of two Su-30s, Major, right where Jester's beacon was transmitting. And then we found your crash site, 80 miles west. He leaned in again. We have Jester's report, which says you were dead before any of that happened. We have two destroyed enemy bogies, with no record of any friendly missile being fired. And we have your Fenrir, a smoking hole in the ice with a data recorder that is corrupted. He let the word hang in the air. Completely wiped, Major, fried from the inside out, as if by a massive internal electrical surge. She stared at him. The room felt small, the walls closing in. It was gone. All of it. The isolation, the choice, the missile, the impossible, monstrous, desperate act. It didn't happen. There was no proof, no black box, no telemetry. There was only her word. The word of a pilot who just survived a 10G evasion and a crash landing. She wasn't a savior. She was just a story, a loose end. So, Major, Radek said, his voice flat, tell me again, what happened out there? They declared her unstable. Not officially, not yet. But the word hung in the sterile air of the hospital, implied in the gentle questions of the psychiatrist, in the hard, flat stares of Colonel Radek. Her testimony was too clean, too fantastic. A pilot who crashes an experimental jet after claiming to fire a ghost missile slaved to a friendly beacon. That pilot was either a hero of mythic proportions, or more likely, a victim of hypoxia and trauma. They had grounded her, pending review. She was released from the hospital 2 days later, her leg in a brace, a crutch tucked under her arm. The base felt wrong, alien. The sound of other jets taking off was a physical pain, a reminder of what she had lost. Her identity. She didn't know what she needed. Absolution, validation. She needed to see him. She found Jester in the mess hall during the off hours. The vast room was mostly empty, smelling of stale coffee and floor wax. He sat alone at a table by the window, staring out at the gray Norwegian tarmac. His left arm was in a black sling. Her crutch thumped rhythmically on the linoleum. Thump, click, thump, click. He heard her and looked up. His eyes. They were not the eyes of the panicked, instinctive pilot she had dismissed in the briefing. They were old, haunted. He had seen the void, and he had been pulled back. By her. She lowered herself into the chair opposite him, the movement awkward, painful. Her ribs screamed. She set the crutch against the table. They sat in silence for a long time. The clatter of trays from the kitchen was the only sound. He was the first to speak. His voice was a low, rough whisper. They said you were gone. Katerina looked at her hands, resting on the cheap laminate tabletop. I know. I saw the flash. The one that, when you vaporized, she said. The word was flat, dead. Yeah, he nodded. I reported you KIA. I told them. I heard you, she said, looking up, meeting his eyes. His breath caught. You? How? My receiver was working. Only the receiver. I heard everything. The whole fight. Jester stared at her, his mind clearly racing, trying to reconcile the impossible. You were there? The whole time? When the second bandit was on me? I was there, she said. I was blind. I was screaming at you to break. My God, he whispered. He looked down at his own hands. Then the other two, the ones that came for me in the water, I didn't see them. I just heard the explosion, a big one. It knocked me out of the raft. He looked up again, his gaze intense, searching. The report says it's unexplained. They're calling it secondary detonation from the first bandit I hit. A sympathetic explosion. It's bullshit, Katerina. I know, she said. He leaned forward, his one good hand gripping the edge of the table. They think I'm crazy. They think you're shell-shocked. But I heard something. Right before the blast. Right before the sky. Ripped open. Katerina waited. Her heart, which she had thought was a dead, cold thing, was hammering. I thought I was hallucinating. The cold, you know? But I heard a voice. On guard. Just one word. He swallowed. I thought I heard Mad Dog. Just once. Like a ghost. Her eyes burned. The sterile smell of the mess hall, the clatter of the trays, the gray light. It all blurred. She refused to let the tears fall. That was a luxury she had not earned. She had killed for him. She had broken every rule for him. She had sacrificed her career, her honor, and her sanity for him. And he knew. He couldn't prove it. It wasn't enough for Radek, not enough for the report. It was uncorroborated, but it was enough. She held his gaze. She didn't need a medal. She didn't need the report to be accurate. She just needed this. This one, silent, shared truth. Katerina Volkov just nodded. Once, the room was gray, windowless, and smelled like old paper. It was a room designed for endings. Colonel Radek sat opposite her, not as an interrogator this time, but as an administrator. The two spooks were gone. They had what they needed. Story to bury. Between them on the metal desk sat a stack of papers, the final report. The inquiry is closed, Major, Radek said. He didn't look at her. He was looking at a spot on the wall just past her left ear. The Fenrir project has been indefinitely suspended. The official findings are conclusive. He slid the top of paper toward her. Katerina looked down. Her own name was at the top. She read the summary. The words were a masterpiece of bureaucratic evasion. A cascade of unexplained technical failures resulted in Major Volkov experiencing spatial disorientation and sensorium illusion, leading to the loss of the prototype. It was all there, a neat, tidy box, and at the bottom, finding, pilot error, secondary to catastrophic systems failure. Pilot error. The words stung. A dull, cold ache, deeper than her fractured ribs. It was the price. The price for Jester's life, the price for the Fenrir's catastrophic flaw. This was her payment. Your career is not over, Major, Radek said, a clumsy, pre-rehearsed attempt at what? Consolation. You will be grounded, of course, pending a full psychological review. But people recover. Recover. As if she were sick. He slid a second document over. This is a non-disclosure agreement. You will not speak of the Fenrir, of mimicry, or of any aspect of Operation Silent Watch. To anyone. Ever. The official record is the only record. He was handing her a gag, a life sentence of silence. This, she realized, was the true, quiet fortitude. It was not the act of bravery. It was the endurance of the consequence. It was the willingness to be erased. She picked up the cheap plastic pen. It felt heavy, a dead weight in her hand. She thought of Jester, of his haunted eyes in the mess hall. I thought I heard Mad Dog. A ghost. He knew. That was enough. The truth didn't need to be in a file. It didn't need a medal or a parade. The truth was out there, in the deep, cold water of the Norwegian Sea, and in the memory of a man who was alive because she had been willing to become a monster. Her strength was now entirely, completely internal. She had endured. She had sacrificed. And she alone would carry the burden and the victory. It was silent, and it was complete. She signed her name, Katerina Volkov. She pushed the papers back across the desk. Radek took them, relieved. He had his scapegoat, The file was closed. Katerina stood, her leg brace clicking as it locked. She didn't need the crutch today. She leaned on the pain. It was hers. It was real. She turned and walked out of the room, leaving her wings, her call sign, and her official honor behind. She walked out into the gray, cold light of the Norwegian sky. She looked past the tarmac, toward the sea. A jet engine screamed in the distance, a sound of ascent, a sound that was no longer hers. She just breathed. 6 weeks later, Katerina sat in a small, sterile apartment in a town she did not know. The snow was falling outside, thick and silent, coating the pines in a heavy white shroud. Her leg brace was gone, replaced by a permanent aching throb and a slight limp she was told would never leave. Her flight suit was packed in a box, buried in a closet she never opened. On the table beside a cooling cup of coffee was a single, flimsy airmail envelope. It had no return address, just a postmark from a naval air station. She had already read it twice. It was from Jester. The words were simple, almost mundane. He talked about his physical therapy, about the frustration of relearning how to use his frost-bitten fingers. He wrote that he had been cleared, that he was back on flight status, assigned to a training squadron. He never mentioned the mission. He never mentioned the Fenrir, the bandits, or the water. He just wrote about the sky. At the very end, a single scrawled paragraph. They say the new data links are perfect, no static, no ghosts. But I've been listening to the old guard frequency. It's funny. You get used to the noise. You start to listen for what's underneath it. Thanks, Kat. Not for the noise. For the quiet. See you in the blue. She folded the letter, her fingers tracing the crease. See you in the blue. A promise he knew they both couldn't keep. He would fly. She would not. This was the true debrief, the final report. The world would only ever have Radek's version. History would be written from a corrupted file and a necessary lie. The committees would debate pilot error, and the Fenrir program would be a classified boneyard of failed ambition. But the truth was not in the files. It was in this letter. It was in Jester's recovering hands, in the sky he now flew, in the empty water where 2 enemy jets had ceased to exist. The story's message was never about the glory of the fight. It was about the agonizing, private cost of the choices that glory is built on. It was about the integrity of an act that no one, save one, would ever know. True fortitude was not the brute force to pull a high G turn or the arrogance to test a system. It was the quiet, soul-crushing strength to fire on a friend to save him. It was the willingness to become a monster to remain a guardian. And this was the final act of that sacrifice. To accept the erasure. To sign the paper that called her a failure. To let the world believe its comfortable lie, because the truth was too complex, too monstrous, and too necessary to ever be recorded. Her victory was not a medal. Her victory was this letter. Her victory was the snow falling outside, and the quiet in her apartment. A quiet she had earned with a scream no one had heard. Katerina Volkov took a sip of her cold coffee. She was grounded, but she was not lost.